I recently got involved in some counter-missionary work. I don't know everything, but I know enough to know that this is a very desperate situation, and we really have to be involved right now. It's pretty bad. So Shannon's going to tell us about how this is so desperate, I guess. Shannon, how did you get involved in what you do?
Well, I was born into an evangelical family, not just any evangelical family. My father was an Assemblies of God minister, fundamentalist Christian. I was raised to be a missionary and involved in the church, and eventually took a big focus on Jewish people, which are prioritized in the evangelical world. Since then, I'm obviously a Jew now, and I've dedicated my life to warning Jewish people and Jewish community about how and why more than a quarter of a million of our Jewish brothers and sisters are in the church today. And we have exposed some of the most shocking cases of infiltration into the Jewish community over the last few years. People who are disguising themselves as Jewish people and taking on Jewish leadership roles, performing sacred Jewish rituals, some of them with tremendous halachic ramifications. And I think right now we're in a terrible time, war. I wish we didn't have to address this. I wish we could focus on what I feel is important in this war. But unfortunately, we have missionaries like Jews for Jesus who have not stopped and are, in fact, are stepping up their game, which I think is why we're here.
I think that for myself, just to give a little background, I first of all want to say thank you to Naomi for putting this together. Before I get into anything, if any of you know who Naomi is, she's an individual who makes these uplifting events, and she saw a lot of this stuff going on, particularly when the war started. It kind of revved up a lot, and she wanted to create a series within her uplifting events that was specifically about speaking out. So thank you to Naomi. I think that for myself, I kind of feel like if like the three of us were at a town hall meeting, you know, you guys are like the activists and the educators, like of any sort of issue, right? And I'm like the concerned parent, right? So I'm the mitzvah mom. I'm like a content creator. Most of my stuff is just very like light, like inspirational connection to Torah Judaism. And for me, what I've seen like in the past few years, first of all, I've seen anytime that I go on YouTube, like a very high percentage of the time I see ads where at first it looks very Jewish, but you look into it and it's not what it says that it is. And you see, I forget what it's called in Hebrew, like the Brit Chadash, I think is what it's called. Over here.
Yeah.
Brit Chadasha, yeah. So, which for those who are unfamiliar, it's basically like, it's basically advertisements here in Israel that are in Hebrew. They look very like, you know, traditional Jewish outreach. But then you kind of go down the rabbit hole and you see like, oh, wait a minute. And like, there's times too where I see a new organization. I'm like, I get a feeling about this. And I click into it and eventually I see that and I go, oh, you know, but I'm also like educated and know about that, right? But I know that there's a lot of people who like don't know so much about it. And I know that for myself, like I tend to keep my content really lighthearted, really like wanting people to feel really good about Judaism. But I had a friend who posted about some of this like missionary type behavior that's going on in Israel currently. And what was interesting to me was when I shared her video on my story, the most kind of pushback that I got was from like fellow Orthodox Jews, like, which was so surprising to me, saying, you know, that we have basically like these people are promoting Israel and, you know, they still give us money and like, you know, why should we say anything like negative? And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, you know, I'm not an expert, but I want to learn more for myself. So I think, Shannon, something that I thought about in making this live was the help that we're getting now. And that I think sometimes people think it's very helpful, but it's very hurtful. And I think that sometimes people don't realize that it's actually impacting people. You know what I mean? Like when you just said 250,000 Jewish people are in these communities, I'm like, wait a minute, what? It's like that many? So I think it would be really good to talk about like some of the tactics that are maybe not so like overt, and how like people really get swept up into this, like Jewish people, how they get sort of swept up in. I would really love to hear a little bit more about that.
The Messianic movement was created as a way to make Christianity more palatable to Jewish people. They realized that they have a PR problem, and that Jewish people are often very proud. There's a lot of pride in a Jewish person, even if they know very little about Judaism.
Mm-hmm.
They are of the opinion that I was born a Jew, that I'll die a Jew, and there's no interest in converting. So they knew that somehow they needed to change their marketing. The church, as we know, has a very dark history with the Jewish people. They needed a facelift, so they did that, and a lot of that was taking our sacred traditions and morphing it into a Jewishy type of Christianity. The training to reach Jewish people is how to deceive and how to change your language. I have a manual on how to share the gospel and how to share the Messiah with a Jewish person, how to speak about things in daily conversations, how to take advantage of people in a vulnerable state, how to infiltrate. Mostly it's the language. I do have a card. Go into this a little bit more in more detail when I tell my story, but there's a lot of examples of how to change the language. You don't say the word Jesus Christ because that doesn't invoke any warm and friendly feelings within Jewish people. In fact, if you have a strong Jewish neshama, that causes you to stand up, and a lot of people are not even comfortable with that, and thank God they're not. But they say his Hebrew name, Yeshua, or Messiah Yeshua. They don't talk about converting. They say to become a completed Jew, a fulfilled Jew. In Israel, they say a Messianic Jew. They'll tell you not to come, they don't call it a church. Don't come to church. They call it a group of Bible believers because that sounds nice. They don't use, like we said, the New Testament. They use New Covenant or the second part of the Bible, or here in Israel, the Brit Chadashah. Everything Jewish, they wrap it up with everything Christian, they wrap it up with a Jewish wrapping and create a Jewishy Jesus that is more palatable for you to accept.
Wow.
Shannon, you went from one opposite extreme to the other. You went from being a missionary to being involved in exposing missionaries. Like, how did that happen? And I want to hear about your missionary days. Like, what were you actually doing? How were you reaching Jewish people? And have the techniques changed over time? Like, from where you came to where, where people are in Israel now, like, what kind of techniques are the missionaries using?
The Jewish community is a pretty close-knit community. They do a lot of things together. They're very closed. So it was not so easy to meet Jewish people. So I was encouraged to go to kosher restaurants, find out about Jewish events and attend Jewish events. Eventually, I started volunteering for the JCC, and you were told not to volunteer in something like, in the back or behind the scenes. Make sure that you volunteer for positions that give you interactions with Jewish people. Volunteer as a greeter or, registration or helping. I delivered Meals on Wheels to elderly people. Elderly people specifically, are so lonely that they will talk about anything if you'll just sit with them for a few minutes. So I was able to easily share the gospel with them. And I think the most important part of that is that it's social interaction. And when we say the word missionary, Jewish people think about, the people who are screaming on Ben Yehuda for you to repent, and the people in New York that are handing out tracts with their Jews for Jesus shirt on the counter, on the corner. But I don't think that a single person has ever converted by one of these encounters on the street. The real success stories are always social interactions. We live in a day where I think every one of us probably knows somebody, a family member, a friend that has converted to Christianity. If you were to go back to them and ask them, how did it happen? They're not going to tell you that it was a professional missionary. They're going to tell you it was my friend at work, it was my neighbor, it was my college roommate. It's these social interactions that lead the way to this, because evangelicals have a world focus, but Jewish people are prioritized, and they use absolutely every means. They are always leading into those discussions, and you feel off guard. A lot of people tell me that they've never been missionized. I have Christian friends all over, and they never proselytize to me, but I'm pretty sure that's not true, because I think in everyday conversations, you probably have spoken about faith. They have probably told you how they deal with a difficult situation. They've probably told you about an event at their church, but they're a friend. And I was always, in every conversation, leading my Jewish friend to ask me about something. When you're the one to ask, you don't feel like they're the ones. Your defense.
I guess
are down, your
step-by-step relationship building.
Right. It's a friendly conversation, and your guard isn't up.
So for people listening, right, who might be in, like, to be very honest, like, I'm sort of in an Orthodox Jewish bubble in Israel, right? Like, I'm not like a type of person who's like, working with people of different faiths and different backgrounds, whatever. But for people who are watching this, right, who work in sort of like mixed environments, what do you think is what are things that they should know that are sort of like boundary lines or things that they should be aware of, like in these conversations? Because as you're saying, there might be a situation that they might not even realize that there was someone trying to missionize them. So what are things that they can look out for? What are kind of boundary lines that they should have? I'm curious about that.
I think less affiliated Jews are more aware. I think the Reform and the Conservative are more aware of the efforts. And I think the Orthodox world in particular believes that it is insulated from these, which I think is why some of the exposing of missionary infiltrations into the Orthodox world have been so shocking. Rabbi Singer made Aliyah to Israel. I think it's been 4 years now, maybe. He was shocked when he did lectures, because he had people attending that would come up and they were Haredim. Rabbi Singer's first language is Yiddish, and coming here for the first time ever, he has done exit counseling in Yiddish. The most insulated communities are being penetrated, and that they're reaching where we think are safe places. Where Ruchy is, in Muncie, and a lot of the communities in New York, this is a New Testament in Yiddish. And it's to reach those more insular communities. It looks like a safer. One of the news reports we just did not long ago was that it was sent with the shul as the return address, so it looked like it was a safer that was delivered to everybody in the congregation's address. And we, besides the insular communities, Yiddish is being used to reach our most vulnerable, which right now are the elderly and Holocaust survivors. You can go into a nursing home and ask who's not being visited, who is the most lonely, and it's called deathbed evangelism. It's heart-wrenching. They reach these people when they're at the the end of their life, and it's devastating, and it's had a devastating effect. It tears apart families. It's a real problem.
Is there a specific move towards targeting people who go through trauma? Because we see like there are people who are very associated with Christianity that are getting extremely close to, let's say, the October 7th survivors. What do you think they're doing there? Are they just being friendly? Are they just helping? Or do you think they have ulterior motives?
I think every time there's a crisis, it opens the door. There's a frenzy from missionaries. And they're right. It's when we feel the most vulnerable, we feel like we need all the friends we can get. And like you said, people were criticizing and saying, how can you speak badly about this community? They're helping. We're surrounded by evil. We're surrounded by enemies. There was a horrific, horrible attack that we suffered here, where everybody here in Israel knows somebody personally who has been killed or is serving, or that you are worried about every day. Our communities have been devastated, and we're all hurting, and it feels really nice to have people say, we love you, and we want to stand with you, and we're going to support you, and they bring charity. But when it crosses the line and we see, things that they don't want us to see, they do fundraising for these efforts with people in America. And when they're doing these fundraising, they take their mask off and they're honest about what they're doing. They're telling people, God has created this situation. We're at the end times. We're close to the second coming. Jewish people are hurting and they need Jesus. And we are the hands and feet of Yeshua, and we are showing them Jesus in real physical ways. They're going to the bomb shelters, so they're talking about and sharing with their supporters that people are coming to Jesus and accepting him in the bomb shelters. We're at the hotels, and we're working with families and children. We're bringing a lion and the lamb, which is very symbolic in Christianity about the second coming of Jesus. They're giving these little figures to children in hospitals of people from those evacuated communities. It's hard to see that, and we do need the help, but there's a boundary, and that it's a red line. I wish they could stand with us and be honest and say there's a war going on and we need to focus on what's important, and we're all going to put that aside. But they're not. Even during COVID, we had a case where we exposed a letter was sent out to all of their supporters saying, God created COVID so that the Jewish people would come to Jesus, and people are hurting and they don't have any income and they're locked up in their homes and they're very alone. So we're delivering groceries, and when we deliver groceries, we're able to share the gospel with them, and they have videos where they're going into the homes, and the Jewish people are so thankful and appreciative, and then end up accepting Jesus, and it's through that friendly, nice contact that they are able to succeed. And unfortunately, we're so desperate for that love and support that we are opening the door without our guard up, and without saying we love the support, but we're not going to tolerate this.
Is it illegal that they're trying to missionalize children? I thought this was illegal in Israeli law.
There are only a couple of laws about proselytizing. Unfortunately, a lot of people have a misconception that it is illegal to proselytize in Israel. It is not. In fact, anybody who's come to Israel or walks the streets in Israel, you see it all over, all the time. the two laws are that you cannot missionize to children. You cannot convert somebody without the permission of their parent, which I attended a conference and asked how they get around the laws, and I was told that that law, there's like a little go around, it applies to an adult to a child, but a child to a child is perfectly okay. So we need to equip our children. We need to have our youth here evangelizing. They use children to hand out pamphlets that are made into cartoons and little books and put them on the bus stops. But it is illegal, but it's not helpful if it's not enforced, and it has never been enforced in Israel. Any attempt to enforce it, there's a lot of backlash. The Christian community, screams religious rights and religious freedom.
So as you're saying this, I'm just thinking to myself, there are a lot of people in my Orthodox Jewish neighborhood who get involved in some of these like outreach efforts to hospitals, like in a frum way, in a Jewish way, that get involved and whatnot. But does that, I'm wondering if that should mean that we should be even more we need to get involved with this, because we kind of we want to be there for our brothers and sisters so that other people don't try to try to evangelize to them when they're in these hotels or in these bomb shelters or wherever they're at. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are for the religious community in being involved.
Absolutely. I think it's easy to point to the Christians and say it's them, it's their fault, they're the evil ones, they're the ones that are wrong. The hardest thing for us to do is to hold up a mirror against ourselves and say, how did we get into this situation? A lot of times it's that we haven't been taking care of our own. We haven't been so nice to each other. When there's a joke that when you go into a church, the first thing you hear is do you have a place to eat? Do you have do you need clothing? Do you have a person to marry? They're so loving and so embracing. But the first words you hear when you go into a shul is, you're in my seat. That's not funny.
No. I'm saying that it's I knew you were going to say that, and I'm just
we know that.
Oh my gosh!
And I think we need to do a much better job at treating each other more kindly. I think we need to do a much better job of taking care of our own. There used to be huge efforts. There's a lot going on between the diaspora communities and Israel, and that's unfortunate. And we need to find some way to fix that. Because there used to be huge efforts where the diaspora Jewish community gave a tremendous amount to all of these efforts. And we were taking care of our own much better than we were. But the Christian missionary organizations have stepped up, and they give a lot. They do a lot, and I think we've gotten lazy in a lot of areas. A lot of things that Jewish people used to take care of, they've allowed Christians to. We had an organization that joined partners with Jewish Agency, which is one of the organizations that brings in the most Olim, new immigrants. And a Christian organization bought up a bunch of land. They were rebuilding all of the buildings in the area, and they partnered with Jewish Agency saying, look, we have the land, we have the volunteers, we have the money. We'll take care of them. We'll give them a place to be. And how does the government say no to that? We have the kitchens, we have that's a tremendous piece of the budget that could be done away with and used in other places. So it's very easy to justify giving that over. But it wasn't so kosher, and that relationship ended up being severed. because we went to see what that organization was saying behind the scenes. They were broadcasting to their supporters in America, saying, look what we're doing. We're on the ground and we're ministering to Olim. We're ministering to IDF soldiers. We're hosting them for Shabbos meals. We're having them for Pesach Seders, and we're sharing Yeshua with them. Going in the church and hearing them do their tours to fundraise and saying that, there's an openness to the gospel. There's more congregations, more people coming to Jesus. Even the government is in on it and more accepting of Jesus. And now is the time. There was a launch of a 10-year deadline for them. They believe that they're on a time clock. And from 2023 until 2033, they believe that the second coming is going to come by that time, and that there is a 10-year goal to bring all the Jews to Jesus during that time. So right now, more than ever, they're doing anything and everything they can to bring that about. They
Shannon,
see everything as
Wow.
the second coming and fulfilling prophecy in the end times.
Mhm.
could you explain to the listeners why the Jewish people are so important in Christian theology?
Yeah,
Like,
that was my
what's their focus on us?
yeah.
Yes,
Why are they so obsessed with us?
that comes from the New Testament, the book of Matthew. Towards the end of the book of Matthew, Jesus is speaking to a Jewish audience when he says, I will not come again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. So it is Jewish people specifically coming to Jesus that triggers the second coming.
Do they have any boundaries when it comes to missionizing? When they want to proselytize, is there any cutoff point? Like, where does the deceit, where does the relationship cross over into an area that they're not allowed to go into?
There is a verse in the New Testament saying to the Jew, I become a Jew, to the weak I become a weak, to those under the law I become as one under the law. I become all things to all men, so that by all means I can save them. That justifies deceptive tactics. Basically, you look like, you act like, you speak like, you do anything you need to do by all means necessary to save them and bring them to Christ. And when that is the theology you're going by, that's exactly what they're doing. Shocking that we found a rabbi who was, a mohel, a sofer, a Kabbalist. It was, performing weddings. They were performing divorces. Had tremendous in that they were pulling it off and playing the role. It's scary.
How do we protect ourselves in the religious world then? Like, how do we, like, if you're saying someone who's like a sofer and a mohel and all of these different, have all these different job descriptions that are so important to our tradition, like what do we do if it's like you don't always want to feel like you're the all agent with every single new neighbor and like interrogating them about every little thing, but what do you do, like, practically?
Right. I think we all play Jewish geography when we go into a room, who knows who. And we need to have our radar up and not ignore the red flags. When there's something that seems a little off, ask a little bit more and don't be afraid to ask. Some people say, I don't want to ask. But if somebody's coming from like somewhere where I'm coming and they ask what my background is, I would be open and share that. If things don't make sense, if they don't add up, follow up on that. Not to a point of paranoia, but bring it to somebody who can. Bring it to Jewish leadership. I wouldn't suggest, like gossip or sharing it with other people in the shul, but bring it as a genuine concern to Jewish leadership. Perhaps they know of the background story and why that person talks a little differently. It's always been, every case has been exposed by somebody who didn't ignore the red flags. Story that didn't make sense, a check that was used to pay for a Yiddish language program. Somebody noticed a symbol on it and said, I don't know what this organization is. Just looked it up and said, whoa, this is a big missionary organization that's paying for a Yiddish language program. And sure enough, it was covert missionaries that were learning Yiddish in order to infiltrate the Hasidic community in New York. But people should not ignore those red flags, especially if you have converts in your shul, people who know that world. If they say something and say something's not right with that person, or I recognize that person from my past, don't blow it off. Take it very seriously and follow up on it.
What do you think about there's certain organizations out there that are actually encouraging interfaith dialogue? You'll have rabbis joining together with Christians, with pastors, with preachers. Where's the cutoff point? Should we be encouraging such relationships?
I like Rabbi Soloveitchik's view on that, is that we need to be engaging with all communities for political, social, economical things, but they should never, ever cross the boundary into the theological discussions. That's where we need to be careful, because the lines are being blurred between Judaism and Christianity, and it's putting our people at risk.
Isn't lying against, isn't that against Christianity to lie and to be deceitful? But then if it's for this purpose, can you explain a little bit of the theology behind that?
They don't believe it's a lie. You probably have justified and done similar. You have a child that you need to go, take them to the doctor to get a shot. You might lure them into the car with a lollipop and say, we're going to go for ice cream, and get them, just to get them there. That it's to save their life. And to a Christian, they believe they're saving your life. You're in a burning building, and they want to get you out. And whether they have to throw you over their shoulder and figure out, why psychologically you're fighting them, they're going to get you out, and you'll eventually come to see that they were right and they saved you.
Shannon, how did you come out of Christianity? Because you said you were a minister's daughter?
Yes, ma'am.
How did you go from there to here? You're an Orthodox Jew now. Can you tell us your story a little bit?
Right.
I was desperate to save Jewish people, and I was very dedicated in accomplishing that. And I tried to be the best missionary I could. I happen to have been obsessed with the Orthodox world. They intrigued me. I would watch them and see all of the rituals and traditions that they did. I, of course, thought they were empty and that Jewish people didn't have a relationship with God. You can't have a relationship with God because you don't have forgiveness for sin. But I admired how they tried and how everything, about God seemed to be, part of their everything they did in their life. So I studied them a lot, and I learned very quickly that they knew a little bit more about the Bible than less affiliated Jews. I encountered some tough Orthodox Jews who seemed to have a little bit of a counter-missionary background or knew the Christian arguments, and they would argue with me. I figured that I would have to learn the text in Tanakh. There's prophecies in Tanakh that I believed proved that Jesus was the Messiah. And they gave me a hard time. They told me things like it was mistranslated, that I was taking things out of context, and I thought that was absurd. I would throw back at them that they're not, and you're just regurgitating what your rabbis say. And I challenged them that if they would just look at it themselves, they would see. I was taught that the Jewish people had a supernatural veil over their eyes, that they were blinded. And if I continued to keep trying, and if I could just get them to look at the text themselves, that God was going to remove that blinder, and they would see Jesus in those texts just as clearly as I did. That wasn't so easy. I decided that just like I changed my language, I was going to have to find another way to present the gospel to those more religious Jews. So I took their challenge. They said it was mistranslated. I was going to learn the Hebrew of that verse. They said it was out of context. I set out to not just quote the one verse, but I was going to learn the whole chapter or the book if I have to. I was going to show them in context, that Jesus was in the Tanakh. And that's where it fell apart for me, because they were right. Every prophecy I went through trying to prove it to them was either mistranslated when I actually went to the Hebrew, or it was taken out of context when I would learn the whole chapter or the whole book and find out it's not at all what it meant to be. I became more confused. I ended up learning from rabbis who understood the text and knew that. And that was like a bomb in my life. It shattered, the very core of everything I was devoted to, everything I did in my life, everything that was my focus, my core of my being was shattered. I felt betrayed by the church because I thought that my Bible was the living words of God. It was true. And to find out that things were purposely mistranslated, and they were mistranslated in such a way that it smushed and made it look like Jesus. It was mistranslated in a way to make things look Christological. And if you read it in Hebrew, it doesn't sound like Jesus at all. But if you read it in English, in a Christian Bible, it sounds very much like Jesus, and a Jewish person would say the same. It was shocking. It was devastating. And then there was a loss of relationships. I'm not sure Jewish people realize, but when you are a Christian and you reject Jesus, you're not accepted in those circles anymore. You're immediately cut off. There's New Testament verses that say that one who denies Christ is the Antichrist. The Antichrist in Christianity is basically, I was the devil. There are New Testament verses that said you're not allowed to open your door to somebody who denies Christ. You're not allowed to have them sit at your table or welcome them in your home. So absolutely every relationship that I thought would be there forever, no matter what, was severed. So it was a very lonely journey. It was very scary.
Wow. I'm curious too, so you have this moment where you're rejecting what you knew growing up, and you say, okay, I'm seeing the truth within Judaism, but Judaism doesn't inherently mean that someone has to convert to it, right? Like we have the Noahide laws, like people are able to be connected while not full on converting. Like I'm wondering, what was that moment when you went, wait a minute, like I actually want to be a part of this,
Right.
like halakhically, fully, however you want to put it.
The community aspect of Judaism was very attractive. I had lost every bit of community that I knew. So wanting to be part of a community was special. Wanting that direct connection with God, which of course as a B'nai Noach you have as well. And I'm not sure it's explainable. I think everybody has their own journey, and I know B'nai Noach who are so happy to be B'nai Noach, and that's good for them. But there was a yearning in my soul. I had to do it, and I wanted that for my children. I wanted a Jewish life for them. I wanted them to observe Shabbos. I wanted them to have a Jewish day school education. I wanted us to be immersed in that. I felt that was the best thing for us.
The conversion process into Judaism usually takes a couple of years for most people. So if somebody asked me recently, they said, like, oh, what is the opposite? Like the conversion from Judaism to Christianity, what does that look like? They were curious.
Wow.
You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, it's very simple. You simply accept Jesus as the Messiah. You say you believe in him. There's a sinner's prayer. You just say, I've sinned, I need forgiveness, and it's generally followed by a baptism. It's just symbolic, but it's very easy. And then you're forgiven for all of your sins and no longer responsible, and it's very easy.
You have a whole new family
Yes.
and a whole new support system.
It's very, very easy.
Wow.
It's appealing to Jewish people who, you have laws, and people see them sometimes as restrictive and a burden. So to be free of all of that, is very attractive.
How do we sort of, like, I know that there's an organization called Jews for Judaism, or maybe it was a movement, I don't know. I don't exactly know how they work, I just know the name. But I'm wondering, like, how do we, like, as people who live Torah, like, how do we, like, connect with people in a way that's also, like, because you've seen both sides of it, I'm wondering, like, how do we connect in a way that's, like, more, that it doesn't look like we're just, like, halacha robots, you know what I mean? We're not just, like, robots of Jewish law, that there's, like, meaning behind it, especially for people that are really turned off by it, and who might be, like, oh, like, very into this, like, oh, you just have to say one sentence and I'm good? Like, I understand why people would see that as attractive, but I'm curious, because you've seen both, like, our attitude as Torah observant Jews towards those who aren't close to Torah.
I was attracted by the sense of personal responsibility that is in Judaism, and that we're responsible for how we act and how we are with each other. Hashem takes much more seriously how you treat your fellow man than even your relationship with God. We go through that in Yom Kippur. I forget what the second part of your question was.
Oh, I just mean more like making Judaism feel more like homey, warm. Like when you talk about someone comes into like a Christian organization, right? And they get asked, oh, do you have food? Do you have a place to sleep? Or like marriage options, things like that. Like they're very, very there for them. Like I'm wondering how, like, do you feel like Jews should do kind of like that in our communities? Or I don't know, I'm like curious as to the thoughts of kind of actualizing that Beyneynu
I think
l'chadiro.
we should always show the beautiful aspects of Judaism, and that even the most mundane things that probably look very silly to the outside world, when you learn the meaning behind them, and how beautiful it is, it's inspiring, and you can explain that and inspire people with everything you do. I loved the Jewish Book of Why, because I felt like a little kid. Everything I watched a Jewish person do, I was why. And when I got those explanations, instead of just saying, do this, and this is how you do it, tell the meaning behind behind it. Talk about, I was a Sephardic rabbi who filled the Kiddush cup up to the top, and then he put a drop of water in it. And it didn't seem like it. He just said, that's what you do. And I said, but tell me why. I want to know why. And he says, the cup represents judgment, and we have to stand before God and get judgment. But the water represents, the mercy. With the judgment, there's a little bit of mercy. I thought, wow, that's beautiful. A husband kissing the mezuzah when he walks in the door, and to, put the outside world behind him, and prioritize his family, his wife, his children. The prioritization of family and Shabbat, to have that time where we separate and we enjoy our family. The traditions that we do, sometimes they seem silly. They really bring us together. Very special to have a Shabbos table with the children. I'm always inspired when my kids, who know nothing about Christianity, thank God, talk about at the Shabbos table a Devar Torah that they learned in day school. And I went, oh my gosh, I want to go back to kindergarten. I want to learn Judaism, like a child, and I want to know it, second nature, like they do. Judaism, when you learn what's behind it, is so beautiful and so inspiring. It can be.
Wow, you've come a long way. How long are you out of the church?
It's been 17 years now.
Wow. Gematria Tov. Good.
17 good years.
Yeah, we're
crazy journey. I never thought I'd be here, but thank God I am.
Wow.
Now you're here and you're inspiring so many people and helping the Jewish community in ways that other people wouldn't be able to do. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. So do you want to tell us a little bit about Beyneynu?
Yeah.
What exactly do you do at Beyneynu?
A non-profit organization that we monitor missionary activity worldwide. It's probably a good thing the Jewish people are not subscribing to all of the Christian newsletters and YouTube channels, but we monitor those. We watch for those, and that gives us an insight to how they're operating in our communities and where their efforts are located, what they're up to and who they're targeting. We encourage people, who get upset about, missionary material in their communities, send it to us. One, it tells us what techniques they're using now. It also, I map it out. I know what organizations are active where and what communities they're targeting. And it tells us where to put our efforts, where they're after, where we need to be more active in taking care of our own. And exposing cases that we never thought possible, so that the Jewish people know that, wow, this is a place that is an open door. This is where we're vulnerable, and we need to close that door. We need to be more careful.
I remember growing up and being if there was an anti-Semitic thing, it was like you call the ADL. You go online and you contact the ADL. But now, for this particular type, of the missionizing type stuff, it's like call Beyneynu. Right. Should be kind of like the rallying cry of call them, connect with them, because I think sometimes we think right now we're in a physical war, right? But we forget that there's a very, very, very big spiritual war going on, right? And that people want to take us away from.
And don't be afraid that we already know about it. We might already know about it and might be on top of it, but there may be something that you can do. A lot of times people say, there's a missionary who's contacted me, I'm in a WhatsApp group, and what do I do? And reach out to the admin of that WhatsApp group and let them know that it's being used in that way, and they can help take care of that. But when you see something, say something. Really.
One more question. I know we're winding down unless you want to keep going. I love talking to you, but
I'm okay. You're okay.
getting from the stage of being, let's say, raised inside of a Christian environment to actually infiltrating a frum community, an Orthodox community, you have to acquire information along the way. How are these missionaries getting that information? What is their entry point?
Friends, and we've discussed the covert missionaries. Some people say, but the covert missionaries that we have exposed, there aren't a lot of examples where they have, openly shared the gospel with somebody. And their job as a covert missionary is not to openly share the gospel with you. They are in place to be the, do the reconnaissance work, the contacting people. If you wonder how a missionary got the membership list for your shul, it's most likely that somebody obtained that somehow. Volunteering as I did at the JCC gave me access to certain things and ways to contact Jewish people.
Are there any communities that are more susceptible, let's say Chabad houses or something? Are a missionary just like randomly going in and joining classes and like absorbing lingo and things like that?
They are.
Is that like a step?
And that's one of the dangers of these, opening things up to Jews and non-Jews. Christians who are obsessed with converting Jews are taking that information and using it to help better portray themselves as Jewish people, to go up to a Jewish person and say, I keep the Jewish holidays, and they'll give over an inspiring Devar Torah that they learned from a legitimate rabbi who was teaching kosher Torah, but they will give it over, and it was beautiful and inspiring, and it brings that Jew to, will come attend my Bible study.
Really misappropriating.
Right.
Wow. Yeah.
Somebody just asked a question: is Beyneynu operating only in Eretz Yisrael, or is it in America as well?
Worldwide.
So,
One thing we have Beyneynu. I'm not the only one. You don't hear a lot of public stories because it's difficult to come out publicly to tell your story, especially as a convert. You want to be accepted as any other Jew in your community. You don't want your children to be taught, treated any differently. You want to fully be accepted.
we have a name Noach that.
Beyneynu. There are so many, thousands, tens of thousands of people with exactly my story who have come out of the church and either in the conversion process have converted or remain Beyneynu, and they have volunteered and helped us, and they're all over the world. So when you have volunteers all over the world, they become your eyes and ears all over the world, which has been tremendous because we're able to monitor much more, and it's because of people who've been through this journey.
Mm-hmm. I think so. Naomi just asked, how can people volunteer and partner with Beyneynu?
If you have experience in this, if you have a background in this, you're always very helpful. We have videos that we are constantly monitoring, subscribing to, and looking for, what is important for Jewish leadership to see. And it's not so easy. You'll see videos that we put out, and it's a 1 minute, 2 minute clip. But those 1 to 2 minute clips are from a hour to 2 hour sermon that was streamed in a church. So it's a lot of reviewing
Hours.
videos and tagging them and saying this is an important thing that Jewish people need to know about.
Do you accept donations?
Absolutely. This is it's not cheap to do what we do, and it's not so well supported because people don't see the need. It's very embarrassing. It's humiliating. Like we said, we're living in a time where everybody knows somebody in their family who've been affected, but it's not talked about, and I think it happens much more than people realize.
Yeah. I moved from the facilitated community in Muncie. Sorry, go ahead.
Rabbi Singer is overwhelmed. He works, all day, every day, just counseling and bringing people out of the church.
Wow. It's so wild because I remember learning about whatever. We had one particular rabbi when I was in seminary who would talk about why you should say this thing against this in Christianity and all of that. And I just was so ignorant at the time. And then it wasn't until I actually recognized someone who was dafka, like specifically missionizing outside of the hotel, that I went, wait a minute. It I felt like it opened up my eyes to see that it really goes on. Naomi also asked, also, please share some numbers on how many missionary organizations are operating in Israel to convert Jews. How many Jews are coming on a yearly basis? Do we have any data on that? Or
when I first made Aliyah in 2015, the number of Jewish people who accepted Jesus and that identify themselves as Messianics was 15,000. That number in the last survey that was done has jumped to 30,000, and it's only been a little more than 5 years. So that is incredible. There was 100 Messianic synagogues when I first came. Now there are more than 300 Messianic organizations in Israel. There are more than 200 websites, most of them in Hebrew and English, that are dedicated to bringing Jewish people to Jesus. It's the numbers are it's alarming.
wow, that is very alarming. And I am glad though that, I'm so glad that you did start Beyneynu, because I feel like it's the concept of the refuah before the makkah, that like we're starting to see this, but we also have people who know what's going on and who can, with the right strategizing, with the right awareness, and people not really being afraid to speak up about it, because they see, like, it was even a little scary for me to share my friend's video of like trying to expose some of this missionary behavior. But I thought, you know what, like, I only need to fear Hashem. I only need to fear God. And I think if we have that attitude, then we're going to please God.
It's very neat that you said that. An introduction a couple years ago by a rabbi at one of our conferences was that it was right about the times in the late 70s, early 80s that the Messianic movement came about. And it was the morphing the language and the trying to prove that Jesus was the Messiah through Tanakh. That was the method then. And right about that time, Rabbi Singer came on to the scene and has made a huge impact and became the voice of countering those arguments and proving every one of those arguments wrong. And now we're dealing with another, they've upped it. We're dealing with infiltrations throughout the world. It's become a much bigger danger. So to have so many people who have been, a lot of them impacted by the work of Rabbi Singer, who have come out of the church. And now it's sort of like an army of people who are aware and know the agenda intimately, because that's where they came from, that we're able to watch. It's much bigger than one person can handle. And like Hashem seems to have sent the cure, then, and has upped it and is creating the cure now with all of these people coming out and standing to protect the Jewish communities.
One of the new aspects of this epidemic that we're facing is that people within the Frum community just don't realize that there's a threat. Mm-hmm. They're very naive. They just don't realize. So Naomi's raising awareness, because until now, I don't think most people were raising awareness. They were just like, there was those who know and those who are countering inside the field. And then there was the Frum community who thinks, oh, we're safe and we're protected and everything. And they're just like, so Naomi, thank you so much. This is definitely a needed thing that's happening right now.
Yeah, education and awareness are the only way I see to fight this. Education, I think we need to inspire our children to take their Jewish education seriously, to learn their own Bible. When you know your own Bible, nobody's going to be able to, sell you a counterfeit. Right. And awareness for people to know that it's really happening. It's really danger, and they are after your kids and your grandchildren. And
I honestly feel like you are like the Rivka Beyneynu, like seeing the twins
Aw.
inside of you. And Yitzhak, who's like the FFB, is like, no, Esau's fine. It's okay. But she's like, no, I've seen this before. And that's honestly what I feel like you are doing. And it is, wow. I just kol hakavod. Like, I'm just sitting here like, why am I on this live? Like, it's
Thank
just
you
so
so,
like
so
cool.
much.
Yeah, Shannon, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm also glad to hear that Naomi's next week is going to be Rabbi
Kravitz, I
from
think.
Jews for Judaism, which is also very
Next,
cool. So people should
that
tune
Rabbi
into that.
Skovak?
Rabbi
Rabbi, no, Kravitz.
Okay.
Kravitz, yeah.